All good.
Cool.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm Jim Thomas. It's great to be with you today. We have a great topic today, and one that I've become more attached to over the past handful of years. And it's really the looking back to the past of where our space program began. And what's so interesting is most people don't know a lot about the origins because a lot of the origins were top secret. The military purposely was not talking about it because we were, headlong into the Cold War, and so we really couldn't share what was going on or what was, So it's very different than what we see today and how public it is. And obviously, there wasn't social media and YouTube and all the great things that we now have. And so it's interesting and then so little was actually either taught in school then or is taught in school now. So that's one of the questions we want to pose today and talk about a little later is how do we bring space to life? How do we spread the message of what space is all about and why we should even care about it? And part of that is realizing that this is the 75th year of launch from Cape Canaveral. Most people can't wrap their heads around that, but it's an amazing history we've had. Think the Wright brothers were 1903. Think of all that's happened in this century and the past. The Wright brothers being in 1903, and just in 1969 we put footsteps onto the moon. And so this is our chance to how do we look back at 75 years, but then really allow us to look forward as to what the next 75 years will hold, and how do we inspire this generation and the next generation to take us to moon, Mars, and beyond. So one of those things that I've realized, and what I was just mentioning, is people really don't know much about where space began. And mostly because that was top secret. What we're looking at here is a map of Cape Canaveral and NASA. NASA actually came out of the military. This is what you're looking at now is on the Cape they call the Delta, has been a military base. And in actually 1958 is when NASA was brought out of that. And then later, all of that darker green area is what then became the NASA land. But it's interesting, so many people in the space industry don't realize we actually have two spaceports in one. And it gets confusing because people call it Cape Kennedy or just Kennedy or sometimes just the Cape, but it's really a military installation, always has been, or since 1949. And then to the dark green that you see on the screen is really the government NASA side of the operation. And so we'll even take a step back to where that all began. And it was during the Truman administration where the Cold War was really starting to heat up. And people at the time we were mostly testing in White Sands, New Mexico, and that happened under Werner von Braun and something called Operation Paperclip. At the end of the Cold or at the end of World War II, many of the German scientists, rocket scientists, were either going to be killed, captured, or captured by the Soviets. And the sentiment at the time was, as one of the spoils of winning the war, let's take that intellectual capacity and keep it from the Soviets, and let's bring some of those top minds to the U.S. and put them to work for our space program. Mostly not controversial at the time. It's gotten a little more controversial over the years because obviously these guys were building rockets for the German military and the Nazis. But we gave them an option. We said, well, you can go to prison, or you can come work for our space program. And that was the sentiment at the time, is let's do that. The picture on the right is one of those modified V2 rockets that we started launching out of White Sands, New Mexico. And unfortunately, one of those wayward rockets actually hit the country of Mexico. And so we sent a very nice apology letter saying sorry for bombing you. And we then under the Truman administration, that's where he says, "Hey, why don't we launch rockets over the water?" And that's where after just I was like, I think this is great timing if this is. We just had a rocket launch from Cape Canaveral. I'm in Cocoa Beach right now, and in the background, as I'm talking about this, I could hear the roar of a rocket. They happen every 2 or 3 days now. It's just amazing. It's great to be out here on the Space Coast, and just such a exciting time. So, Anne, I appreciate you arranging that. So I'm glad SpaceX agreed with it. So, anyways, the sentiment at the time was let's bring all of that test range and let's bring that to the Cape. Let's launch over the ocean. And what has now and what has was never discussed then is we actually have had 8,000 plus rocket launches from that what is now the Space Force Cape Canaveral Space Force Delta 45. Up on the dark green side at 39A and B, that was home to Apollo and to Space Shuttle and now Falcon Heavy. We've had around they've had around a few hundred launches, and so you could see just the sheer volume and the iteration that was taking place out on the Cape. And then the first launch, and this is what signifies the 75 years, is the first launch was actually a rocket, a modified V2 called the Bumper 8, and that was July 24th, 1950. And why they called it the Bumper is because we took that German technology and we were already working on rocketry, but it really bumped up our program and really elevated our technology. And so that was um, a very exciting thing at the time, but again, also extremely confidential and top secret. But that was the very first launch out here was July 24th, 1950. And then um, just 8 years later, we were headlong into that space race with the Soviets, and they had launched Sputnik. They had beat us to space with the very first satellite. But just a few months later, we were able to launch actually a much more sophisticated satellite, and that was called Explorer 1. And again, that launched out here from the Cape in January 31st, 1958. And what's interesting, if you see on that picture, that's actually the satellite sitting on top of the rocket because we hadn't developed fairing technology or how to even protect what that we should protect satellites as they're going into space or as we do now. So that's the on a Juno 1 rocket back in 1958. Really, it's to be able to go into that blockhouse and to see where it all started is just an amazing thing. And we'll talk about tours and such just a little bit. And just down the road from that same launch pad where Complex 26, where Explorer 1 went up, we have uh, where Alan Shepard, our first American astronaut who went to space, and that's an actual replica of his rocket that's sitting out there on that launch pad. And again, this is all still a military base and this is all off limits, and that's what we're going to be exploring a little later is how do we open that up and make it a real sense of inspiration and sense of pride for folks. This is uh, Launch Complex 5. They sent Alan Shepard up back in 1961, just a few years after we had our first um, Explorer 1 satellite launch. Um, and then up the road from Alan Shepard is a very solemn place, and it's Launch Complex 34, and that's where they were testing Apollo 1 when unfortunately Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee lost their lives during that testing. But this launch pad is still there, and that was a picture that I took just this past year of the launch facility. Um, Down the road from Launch Complex 34 is one of where they keep the most top secret, or what was top secret, in a place called Hangar C, one of the first hangar that was out there. It was built in 1958. This has a rebuilt replica or original of all of our early top secret missiles and rockets. It is the hangar of all hangars, and it is where nobody ever gets to see. Nobody you you have to have, passes to get on base to be able to get into this facility. And that's one of the goals we'll talk about a little later is how do we bring this out from the how do we enjoy it now with tours, and then how do we bring that out from the base. And right around all of this stuff, mixed in with all of this amazing, rich history, are these brand new multi-billion dollar launch complexes. On the left is Launch Complex 36, and that's where Blue Origin has rebuilt that complex for New Glenn. They launched that one time this year, back in early January. And this is the picture on the right is from Texas, but SpaceX is right in the thick of building up not only a Starship launch complex at 39A, but they're also building up on the Cape side Launch Complex 37. They're in the process of spending over $2 billion to bring Starship to Cape and to Kennedy. So this brings us to how do we, with us having working with the U.S. Space Force Historic Foundation, how do we bring all of this to life? How do we make this an experience that people could finally learn more about what happened, what is happening, how do they get closer to space? And that's so with the foundation, we've come up with a campaign called Legacy of Launch, and it's really to honor the past, but then how do we not just, focus on museums and history, but really bring people in and ignite that future. And we have just an amazing team. On the left is Ray Sands. He's the chair of the U.S. Space Force Historical Foundation. And on the right, his dad, General Sands, was the base commander back in the early 60s and actually worked with John F. Kennedy to build out all of those assets that we were just talking about. And it was the foresight that General Sands had to create the museum and the foundation in the first place because he saw how fast they were iterating, how much of that they were building up and throwing away because it was on to the next. And he said someday somebody's going to care about this. Somebody's going to want to learn about this and really bring this, be able to absorb the history and where we came from, and then be able to analyze where we're going. Also on our great team is Bob Ward, and Bob Ward was one of the early employees for Universal Studios, and he was charged with turning Universal Studios from just a movie studio into a theme park. And then later, you can see on the right there, he's working with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg on creating Universal Studios Orlando, literally from the ground up. And it's just great to have Bob Ward on the team as we start to think about what does this legacy of launch campaign look like, and what are the assets that we already have that we can bring to life, or what are the assets that we can ascertain and then use for the industry and also for the public. So we went to a guy named Jared Isaacman and we told him about our goals and dreams and aspirations. And this is a guy who knows a little something about goals and dreams and aspirations. When we were talking to him initially was right after, was not long after his inspiration for flight, spending, 3 days in orbit with three other great astronauts. And we said what we were up to, and he said, "You know what? It is, it's my patriotic duty to help you guys and really work with you to bring all of this concept to life." And from that, we were able to reimagine the Sands Space History Center. It's a little known place on the south side of Cape Canaveral, just outside of the military base security gates, but it's actually on the military base. And it was created in the 90s, and a lot of talk had gone into how do we reimagine this space to really use it as a community asset and to also use it as an industry asset to host all kinds of educational events, to bring in, STEAM education, to have, the conference that we're at today. how do we do more of that in person with this amazing asset that we already have? So through this campaign, we actually shut the History Center down. We came up with just a fantastic plan to reimagine this space. And as we speak, it's currently under renovation, and we're going to have a unveiling on June 12th. So if anybody's out on the Space Coast, let me know, and we'll try to get you on the list for that. And then we're going to have a ribbon cutting on June 17th and open this back up as that community asset, and to be able to host just amazing places. And hopefully that's as we do more, as the industry does more on the Space Coast, besides just launch, of which this year there's going to be over 150 rocket launches from the Cape. I believe next year is already slated for 200 plus. We'll be able to use this as a great asset. So this is something for everybody to enjoy and appreciate and to know about and to figure out how best to utilize for all of our organizations. The next thing in this campaign is, and that's where we were talking, was all of those great assets. We do have access through the Space Force to be able to bring people out to the Delta and to be able to look to those past launch sites and then to turn around and right behind you to be able to see those amazing new assets. And so we're going to start hopefully by the end of this year, and we'll see how as we launch this campaign, we'll be moving this forward as quick as possible. But most people, even who live out here on the Space Coast, has never been able. You can get behind the fence a little easier, or you can buy a ticket, to get behind the fence at Kennedy Space Center. But it's really difficult to get onto the military base unless you have some type of access. And that's the type of access through the foundation that we're talking about bringing to the public and being able to do, field trips and just amazing stuff on base. And following that, another place that people on the Space Coast are very familiar with, but people outside of the Space Coast are not, is this great place called Exploration Tower. This was built, completed back in 2013 as the world's greatest launch viewing tower. Unfortunately, there wasn't many launches going on during those days. It wasn't until the later teens where SpaceX really started picking up the pace in 2016, 17. Falcon, think of Falcon Heavy wasn't until 2018. And unfortunately, this facility shut partly due to COVID and a number of reasons in 2020. This has been unfortunately closed for the last 5 years now, but through the foundation, we're working to reopen this as really what we're thinking of is if not the capital of space. Space doesn't have a capital. And if you were ever going to have a capital, wouldn't you want it to look out onto the greatest spaceport that humanity, or at least the U.S. has built so far? So much of those future launches and us going back to the moon, to Mars, and beyond is going to happen at the Cape and Kennedy. And what a great facility to have this exploration tower to be able to fill that up with private events, public events, open to the public, great retail, food, beverages, all kinds of things. Amazing space outside to do community events. And so we're working with these partners that you see here on the screen, and with the Canaveral Port Authority to hopefully open that up much sooner than later. So that's it's going well, and we're really excited to bring that. And we can do again events, in-person live events there that not just around launches, but great symposiums, all kinds of stuff. So keep a lookout for that. And to kick this is today is just kind of a preview of what we have coming up. We are officially going to launch this campaign July 24th, the day of the 75th anniversary. We're going to roll this out, and we're going to have an amazing event at Kennedy Visitor Complex on July 24th at the Gateway facility. We're going to start at the Legends and Heroes Pavilion. We're going to walk through the Rocket Garden, and then we're going to have this amazing event over at the Gateway Pavilion. And if you haven't been here, this is so cool because they have you can see from that picture there's a Falcon 9 booster hanging up there. There's Oh, there's a replica or an original of pretty much all the great stuff that's going on right now. Even a Dream Chaser from Sierra Space is there, which you can see in the very, very background of that. So we're going to be kicking that off July 24th. So if you're interested in that, certainly reach out to me and we'll see if we can get you into that event. The let me um, the crux of all of this is there's so many amazing assets that have been closed to the Space Coast community, but really to the space industry at large. And we have the ability to bring that back. And like I said, this is our way of honoring the past as we really ignite the future moving forward. So, with that, if anybody has any questions or if we want to talk about how the biggest thing is that we want people to feel more connected to the industry because right now it's like where do you go to get connected? And if you don't know an astronaut or if you haven't met Frank White or if you don't know Mark Wagner, how do you get involved in these things? And how do we bring this not just to the American public, but how do we bring this to really around the world? How many people are just fascinated with what's going on in space? But we'll never, who knows if they'll ever be able to travel to the United States or to Florida. And how do we open this up so people can visit, but then how do we also um, really ignite the imaginations around the world? So appreciate you guys being here.
Hey, are you open to questions?
Yeah, bring them on.
Oh, so many things come to mind in all of this. So much I learned from you just now that I had no clue, and I thought I knew stuff.
Isn't it, but on that point, isn't that amazing? Like, because we all know people that are doing amazing things in the industry, but when you start to dissect some of these, especially from the historical side, bunch of this stuff, I've just learned over. I was always a space geek, but a bunch of this I've just learned over the past, 5 years or so. Yeah. What comes to mind, Kevin?
Well, I work with kids in schools, and so I do space camps and things like that. But as you're talking about the artifacts and the history and the timeline, all of that stuff is just wonderful. I mean, I just want to go back to Goddard and move forward. And in my camps, and we could build little prototypes or little models of each of these relics of that history. And the more you win at this goal of getting all this stuff where it can be found by people like me or those
Yeah.
kids, to have it under wraps just seems so
And it is a shame.
wrong.
How great, but that's what you make a great point of how do we, as we have that access now, you could bring your groups. Obviously, there's travel expenses and all of that, but right now you wouldn't be able to do that. It'd be very difficult to pull that off. And how many great space education groups and nonprofits that we have, around the country. Certainly, there's ample around Florida, but how do we really open up that access? A great point about it. We have it's a replica, but we have one of the original Goddard rockets, which is crazy because that's the 100-year anniversary next year, 1926. And we have that right next to an actual V2 rocket engine. So it's just amazing assets that barely ever get seen, and we just have to figure out how to rectify that.
That history threads together around World War II, buzz bombs. I mean, all the way. I worked a lot with the Cosmosphere in Space Center in Hutchinson, Kansas. Which are you familiar with that, Jim?
I've heard of it, but I've not been.
The Apollo 13 capsule is there. A lot
Oh
of
wow.
flown Russian
Oh
and
cool.
American
Yeah.
stuff is there. It is a jewel in the middle of Kansas, and I know what happened is that it's expensive to house all this stuff, and so
Yeah.
Hutchinson Community College
Yeah.
volunteered to house it, and look what they've got. So, but I go there, and then I always feel guilty for all the people who can't go there. And as you're talking, that same feeling of Now, I know a teacher, for instance, who does a lot of Minecraft EDU, and kids build replicas of all kinds of things in Minecraft. But all the stuff you just talked about, all that real estate, can you
Yeah.
imagine a whole Minecraft world that
Oh,
recreates just to get kids touching and feeling and
yeah.
yes, they're
Yeah.
going to go there. They're going to go there when they're 30. They're going to go there with their family at some point. But right now in third grade, when
Yeah.
they're building that hangar, and one kid is building the V, the
Yeah.
two rocket, and the other one's building
Yeah.
Glamorous Glennis, and whatever they're doing, and
Yeah.
and then they're taking the whole school on a tour of their Minecraft thing in the gym. That all leads to the formation of Jim Thomases. You know what I mean? How many people
Right.
have you
Yeah.
known who say, "Oh my God, in fifth grade, this thing happened, therefore I'm an
Yeah.
archaeologist." It's
Yeah.
important, right?
Right.
Anyway, so yeah, it's not lost
It,
on me the value of what you're trying to do.
and the it's not just about looking back, but I always give this example. Like my mom went to John Glenn High School, but if you asked your average like 8-year old who John Glenn is or who Alan Shepard is, they probably wouldn't know. And these are just such historical figures, and it's there's not the space history, just to know where we came from and to be able to imagine where we're going and how much more accessible space is these days. Because it was like, to be chosen as an astronaut back in the day was like winning the lottery. And now it's, what we're going to see over the next, especially kids today over their lifetimes, the ability to go to space or to work for the Space Force. There's so many opportunities now, but how much of that is being, you're doing great work, but it's like how much of that is seen by the general public, and how do we give you more of those tools to do that? And I think you have a great point about Minecraft, or that's why the question we've been working on is like we know we have the physical assets, and now it's like, how do we bring that into the digital side? And over the next few weeks, we'll be rolling out a Legacy of Launch website where people can get more involved. We're going to have a crowdfunding campaign to where people can be able to get patches and mission coins and feel like they're really a part of that.
Right.
And hopefully, we'll have some type of pledge that goes along with that of
I want to be a part of that thinking,
yeah,
and there's so many great people that could do that. But the gamification of what you just said,
yeah,
right? So if you start at one end of this Minecraft world, and by building or by exploring, you earn those mission badges until you graduate, and then there's a summer camp offering, and then oh my gosh, we can go there. You know how kids are; they're like, oh my God, they have an online gift shop. You win them over, you hook them, and then you cook them, right?
yeah,
But as
yep,
we get to do these things, you know how it is. People just don't see the value. They don't understand what it took to get here,
yeah,
And I think when you know that depth of history, and then suddenly now you're looking at pushing a button and flying on the next Blue Origin flight, you know where you
yeah,
are in that continuum. I think that's important, that we as people know the people who earned this, right?
yeah.
Just good stuff. So I just love it. I love it. And, I don't know about you, but when you go into a hangar or a place and I'm 10 years old again, I'm
Yeah.
just breathing the air, smelling it,
Yeah.
Um,
Have you ever been in a hangar C out here?
no.
Yeah. It would you would it'll just blow you away. Our joke at the foundation is there's life before hangar C and there's life after this. You walk in and you're just like, this is incredible. And you could put your hand on a Mercury Redstone or on a Mercury Atlas, and you see where all this came from. And a lot of this technology, and it's a beautiful story because a lot of that technology was built out of the Cold War as bombs. It was all warring technology, and the beautiful part is we never really used any of it. And
Right.
then we're like, hey, why don't we put satellites on it? And why don't we put people on it? And it just, seeing that evolution of where these were, really meant as items of war. And luckily they were never used that way.
Well, the transition that you just expressed is beautiful, and I can really quickly sort of overlay another possibility is that when you're looking at a delivery system for a bomb to kill people, that turns into a delivery system for a satellite and then humans to the moon.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But and you do the same thing in your mind with the space station and say,
Right.
here we are on the ground fighting and killing, and here we are side by side
Yeah.
maneuvering our solar array so that we have optimal power on the
Yeah.
space station. You see where this could lead to
Yeah.
giving kids multiple ways of thinking about coexisting on this planet is no
Right.
small thing. And so I think having educators adjacent to your mission uh,
Yeah.
is, I think, important because we reverse design this back to third graders and first graders, and you know
Hmm.
what I mean, to things like this. I built this with kids. This is all
Oh, cool.
stuff
Yeah.
out of the pantry, but this is drinking straws and
Oh,
in
wow. That's cool.
containers, and well, they do this and then they own it, right? And then they see the
Yeah.
real one,
Yeah.
and now they're interested in Artemis, and so
Right. Yeah.
again, someone did this to me and to you. I just want
Yeah.
to make sure that it grows. And I'm
Yeah.
excited. I'm 10 years old
Yeah.
sitting here. So,
Well, and it's fun, and that's I love the work I'm doing with the foundation, and then uh, Sean Graham and I started a company called Carmen Line, with the idea of every human is only 62 miles or 100 kilometers from the Carmen Line, and it's really from learning from Frank White about the overview effect of crossing the Kármán line and looking back at Earth that gives you that sense of oneness and wholeness, and realizing that the Earth is it's not states and borders, it is one giant living organism.
mm, it's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
It's potent. I always talk about lifelong learning and the things that happen that you never forget, indelible experiences. And we get so caught up in our current events and our social media and our doom scrolling. And there is a need, there's an absolute need for inspiration out there and for
Yeah.
kids to wonder again and to hope and to dream and all of that stuff. And I feel like right now is the perfect time, I think, to start to create and curate a more, what's the word, optimistic,
Yeah.
Star, almost like Star Trek, how,
Yeah. Yeah.
all these
Well,
wonderful things.
and if that's the future that we all, yeah, aspire to, how do we get from here to there? And what are those, what are those steps? And you talk about reverse engineering, how do we get to that Star Trek world and that Star Trek economy? And it's not going to happen on its own. It's going to be from folks like us, inventing that.
Well, and storytellers. I know Leanne,
Yeah.
her dad played a pivotal role in the space program. And again, what's that story? And I mourn for every story that doesn't get told. It just breaks my heart
Mhm.
in the form
Right.
of people like Leanne, and in the form of facilities like what you curate.
Hmm.
I didn't know anything about this observation tower, and there it
Right.
sits, and to me, you ever drive
all of all of those assets are right there for literally for the taking, and that's why we wanted to put, not just have an anniversary to the significance of 75 years, but to really say, hey, what could really create a whole new experience that we can open up to as many people as possible, so they're, yeah, so they're inspired and they have some inkling of what all this is. And especially as we have so many when Glenn and Starship are launching from the Cape and Kennedy, this coming year with Cadence, it is going to blow people's minds.
Tell me that someone has done a VR tour of these things you're showing us. So at least I could put that on as a primer, as to get me excited about it.
We're we're working on it. We and that's part of the um, doing fundraising for this. The foundation just never had the resources, and then the fact that it's military has created a lot of bureaucratic and military hoops that you have to jump through. And so that's what it's nice having the connection that we do to the Space Force and to the DoD, where I think we can bring that, not just make an immersive bus tour for those who are lucky enough to be able to come out here and go on base, but I think you're spot on, is how do we create that, that VR to be able to bring people into those launch control rooms, to be able to sit and look at the button that was pushed that launched Alan Shepard into space. Like that's a powerful moment to to see that they built government issued cigarette ashtrays into the consoles. Like there's just like it blows you. You're like, is that a government issued ashtray? You're like, yeah, because they couldn't go outside, and of course you have to
Right.
smoke. So, of course there's ashtrays. Yeah, it's the little things that just really,
It is. It is.
it's
Right.
fascinating. Yeah,
Right. You know, when you visit a museum like this and you're looking at the computational, the tools, the
yeah,
circuits, you know, one of the things they do at the Cosmosphere is they rebuild things that have, you know, Liberty Bell 7 was you know,
hmm
built there. And so you're looking at the real circuitry, you're looking at the kinds of
yeah,
resistors and transistors and diodes.
yeah,
Stuff was huge. Stuff was huge and could barely do anything. I mean, compared to your phone, you know,
right,
that's what
right,
kids get interested in. As you say, you know, there's more computational power
yeah,
in a flip phone than
yeah,
Apollo
oh
had
yeah,
in the entire craft. And now you're looking at what that looked like and smelling it. To me, smelling
yeah.
it.
Oh my
I want to
God.
smell it. I want to smell that motherboard.
These you've got to come out here and I'll give you the tour because you're in this launch complex and you can still smell the rocket fuel in these places. Like it is just amazing how well some of them are just so well preserved. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Leanne, have you been out to Cape Canaveral before?
I'm trying to figure out which Leanne you're talking with. I introduced myself earlier. My late husband was the geology training for Buzz Aldrin.
Oh, cool. Wow,
And I'm
that's
an
awesome.
he was actually, Gene Shoemaker was killed trying to join him at,
Wow.
I just came to this room, but I
Sure.
hear
Yeah.
you're
Well,
talking
welcome.
about stories and I can bring a great legacy. My late husband had
Yeah.
a comet named after him. Gene Shoemaker
Oh,
and Carolyn were killed driving to meet him in a
oh,
crater
wow.
in Australia.
Hmm.
I mapped maybe a piece of Yucatan that ended up in Texas as
Wow.
a possible impact structure. So
Wow.
somehow my name got mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
but I'm an astrogeologist.
Well, thanks for joining us. Yeah, we're just talking about all the assets that we have out here that especially on the Cape side, which is still the military base, there just hasn't been a lot of access, but that's where it all where it all began. From the first rocket launch in 1950 of a Bumper 8 to our satellite in 1958 to Alan Shepard 61, and then unfortunately even the that first Apollo 1 tragedy was also on the Cape. They came back and launched Apollo 7 from that same launch complex, and then all of Apollo from 8 on moved over to the Kennedy NASA side. So it was out of 39. I think they all launched out of 39A after that. But it's just the history out there is so rich of Cape Canaveral. And for years, all of those launch complexes were just, kind of abandoned in place and were just falling apart. And now every one of them has been released to a new up and coming rocket company, including, Blue Origin, New Glenn, and SpaceX just took over Launch Complex 37, and they're going to build two Starship towers out there. And it's just, it's some amazing stuff happening.
Wow.
Hey, Ron.
Hey,
So
Jim.
So I heard Leanne talking in another session, and that's what lit my mind up is as we're talking about artifacts in the form of physical things, and talking about gamification. I could see someone doing the VR experience, going through all of this, and suddenly over there it says, "Oh, talk to a mentor," or "Talk to a person."
Mhm.
And you scan the QR code or whatever you do, and Leanne pops
Yeah.
up and goes, "Hey, hi." You know, because some people want that, right? All the way back to Zelda. Remember that little spirit that
Yeah.
goes, "Hey, listen," you know,
All right.
that little tour
Yeah.
guide, that little narrator. Yeah.
Yeah. Leon, what were you gonna say?
One story that
Yeah, please.
always impresses people is, for some reason, someone was carrying a moon rock in a suitcase in a rent car and hit the brakes, and the suitcase fell down and opened, but they thought they got the tube back in this case. but when they got to deliver the moon rock, it wasn't there. So they
Oh.
had to call the rental company and find out who had it. And the highway patrol tracked that person to a hotel, and they went in and they found they found the container.
Oh,
But
wow.
who is the keeper of all these stories? Because
Yeah.
we have
Yeah.
so many of them. And by the way, I put my email in the chat because I'd
Oh,
love
great.
to talk to some
Yeah.
people about this. And also, a lot of people, I'm sorry to hog the
No,
line, but
please keep going.
Gene Shoemaker's ashes are some of Gene Shoemaker's ashes are on the far side of the moon.
Mm,
And Carolyn Porco was the his graduate student when Gene and Carolyn were in the car accident and Gene was cremated in Australia. But they got his
mm,
ashes from Australia to being put on the next mission to the
wow.
probe to the moon.
Yeah.
What people don't know is on the probe there were three legs or supports,
Yeah.
and Gene's ashes were in a little titanium cube or capsule. They
Yeah.
needed to counterbalance that on the other two legs. This is a story I've been told many times. The veracity, I don't know. But they had to balance the contents of the other two tubes with a substance.
Yeah.
It's Safeway cat litter, but no one can verify this. And I've been telling this story to my
Well, they had to
students
use
for
something, right?
years. But
Wow.
no one can verify that cat litter from Safeway's on the moon, but it would be a great selling point.
Well, the moon looks like it's made out of cat litter, right?
Yeah, yeah. So again, my
We just call
email's
it
in
regolith because
chat.
it sounds fancier. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
That's
That's
fun. That's a great story. But it's a great point about how do we preserve that. We have a fantastic volunteer at the foundation, and this past week he passed away, and he worked on some of the earliest stuff and just shared so many stories with so many people, and it's just such a loss to somebody with that big a heart and that big a brain and that many decades of experience to lose them. It's yeah, we have to figure out how to get more of those oral histories, and as Kevin was saying, some of those VR experiences out there. And that's honestly what this campaign is about. How do we preserve it as much as possible, but then how do we really inspire that next generation, and especially with things like Starship coming out and the cost to orbit going so low, we can now start talking about, all the science fiction ideas that people have had over the decades can now become reality because of what we're doing. And most of that is going to launch, right here. So,
wow, very cool.
Ron, what's the most inspiring thing you've heard today?
Oh, I think, just thinking about the astronaut panel and the some of the common themes that Dave and Carrie Ann and Iman
Hmm.
mentioned that are similar to my experience. Like Dave was saying, he's much more relaxed.
Hmm. Oh,
And I felt exactly the same thing.
yeah.
And the way I explain it is like seeing the planet, even briefly,
Hmm.
like we did,
Yeah.
and just knowing, it's going around
Yeah.
and seeing the blackness of space.
Yeah.
It's just such a miracle of existence that
Hmm.
it's like that it's there at
Yeah.
all. And then thinking that, no matter what we do here on the surface, we're so concerned with,
Yeah.
the things that happen day by day. It's like whether, whether we
Right.
get that product that we want so much or go to that event that we want so much to be at,
Yeah.
that's okay if we don't get there. I guess that sometimes because that planet's going around, you know, with or without us.
Yeah. Wait,
So
how do you has your feelings changed or deepened as time has passed since your flight?
yeah, for sure. Like the flight itself was just the spark of
Hmm.
more thinking.
Yeah.
It's been year and a half now, and
Yeah.
I'm still having kind of takeaways
Hmm.
from it.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
yeah, it's really good to have them in dialogue
Yeah.
like that.
Well, and I imagine that that's great that it deepens as opposed to kind of a fading memory. It sounds like
Yeah,
it's almost the opposite.
it is. Ron Guerin explained it as like the intersection of two curves, where
Mhm.
like the up and down the y-axis is
Mhm.
what you remember, and
Yep.
the horizontal axis is time. And as time goes over, what you remember diminishes. But as time goes out, the impact of it on you and how meaningful it is increases.
Oh,
So he said that
right,
really what the one of the point is, you're trying to push the intersection of those two lines as far up and out as you possibly can,
right.
which I thought was a great way. So I'm like really kind of approaching the post-flight experience in that way.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Huh. And I imagine, and that's what you were mentioning, the other folks too. There has to feel like because I think as space geeks, we all feel a certain kinship to each other, and we kind of, you just
yeah,
naturally like other space geeks.
yeah.
But I imagine there's another level of space geek or camaraderie that you have with other folks that have gone up. Is that?
Yeah, it's such a unique experience.
Yeah.
you know uh it's so brief, and I've thought for years that all these people that are making commercial suborbital flights are going with very very different motivations than people that are career astronauts.
Right.
And so what are the outcomes of that? But I love the history of it too, the legacy
Yeah.
of I followed the Apollo missions really closely. I don't know if you know about the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. I'll put a link to that in the chat.
Okay.
It's a great resource for what the moonwalkers did. And I took, I kept a lot of those things in mind post spaceflight. Rusty Schweickart talked about he had an EVA and had like 10 minutes to just wait while they worked the problem. And
Hmm.
he wrote a paper in like the early 70s, and part of it was saying that he felt like he was the sensing element for humanity
Wow.
at that point in time.
Wow.
And that, yeah, any number of people could have done what he did. He had skills, but he's not the only
Right.
person in the world that had those skills.
Right.
But it was just, kind of fate that led for him to have that time.
Hmm.
And he felt the need to report back. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. We should be sharing these stories and,
Right.
and, you
Yeah.
know, talking to people. And yeah, it's always great to find space people that are interested. Yeah.
I forget. It was one of the early it was one of the early shuttle missions where the EVAs they actually had like the jet packs where they were
Yeah.
untethered, and it was a
Yeah.
story I'd heard from an astronaut talking about another one, and he's like, I'm gonna flip around and just stare into the abyss," and they
Yes.
and he talked about how uh, almost unnerving that was, as opposed to then turning back around and looking at being connected to Earth and feeling like, oh, home is there. But it was, I mean, like,
Yeah.
I hope to experience that someday. But
Yeah.
I can imagine what that would be like on an EVA.
Yeah. Amazing. Bruce McCandless did the float away, the untethered
Yeah, yeah,
EVA.
yeah,
Yeah. Uh, he was an Apollo astronaut too. He was backup crews for some of the Apollo missions.
yeah.
Um,
Have
yeah,
you had
what
a
an experience.
tour? Have you had a full tour of Cape Canaveral before?
I've visited the Cape a few times,
Hmm.
a couple times through like the visitor complex,
Uh-huh.
but never any kind of behind the scenes thing.
Yeah.
Or, but
It,
I did visit SpaceX there
mhm.
last April, and
Yeah.
the Blue Origin
Yep.
building the year before.
Yeah.
It's
It
great to see all the commercial
it's
development.
really when you get to go out and stand on like the launch pad of where Alan Shepard went up, and it's so amazing. They have a flame diverter, and it's
Yeah,
about 18 inches tall. And now flame diverters are like two or three stories deep. And
Oh, yeah, the
this is
shuttle flame trench is huge.
it's yeah, I mean it's huge, right? Yeah, the flame diverter for the Mercury Redstone was yeah, maybe 18 inches.
Hmm,
But just to go out there and
that's funny.
to feel the the energy and then to walk, that's what we're trying to open up access to is we have access to actually the launch control room where they where they press the button and it's so well
Hmm,
preserved just to be able
yeah,
to stand in there where Von Braun and everybody else
yeah,
was not sure if that if Alan Shepard was going to live or die.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's pretty cool.
That's pretty. No, I haven't visited those pads. I did
Yeah.
go out and see the Blue Origin pad,
Oh yeah, it's
uh,
and then to
which
be able to see what
kept
yeah what
having.
they used to look like and now what $1 billion Blue Origin pad looks like. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's and
yeah,
then right
improved.
down the street where I was talking earlier about Hangar C. It's just a stone's throw from where Launch Complex 36, where Blue is. This hangar, which was the first hangar on the Cape, has just the most amazing collection, and so few people ever get to see this. So we're trying to rectify all that stuff. Leanne?
Yeah, I'm wondering if someone can clear up or give me insights into a rumor of the role of climate change into the storage of the first generation Apollo images. I was told that they
Hmm.
had to be moved from their location because of fear of hurricanes. But this was like 20 years ago.
Hmm.
And I'm just curious to know how those first generation Apollo images are protected from hurricanes. I'm a science writer. I'm on the
Yeah.
board for DC Science Writers Association, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to track that down.
Huh. That would probably fall under NASA purview. And that's the Space Force Historic Foundation has a good relationship with NASA because I think historically NASA, their mission isn't historical, and they haven't traditionally put a ton of time and effort and resources into preservation. So yeah, that's a great I'll have to ask about that. We have a fantastic museum director named Jamie Draper, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. And every day he's out there either on the Cape or meeting with NASA folks, and yeah, he could tell stories for days. So I'll ask him that one.
Since I'm coming in late, and I apologize for that,
No worries.
how can we, you and I, stay in contact, and how can I see a video of this particular session?
I think they're gonna send. I think they're gonna send them all out. I don't know as one giant video or if they'll send them out individually
This should
afterwards.
be individually. We're
Yeah,
hoping
sorry.
to that it looks like this session is being recorded.
I
Um,
know I recorded it also just as a
awesome,
backup. So
great. So
we
that should that should save to your computer once you exit Zoom.
Okay.
Um, so Mark will send out an email with a link to a Google Drive file folder, and we're hoping to get all the recordings as many. We've been pretty good. The last one we got like 80-90%, I think, of the sessions recorded. So if they're recorded, saved to computer, and whoever recorded them can upload them to Mark. Mark will put them on YouTube. And that won't happen like in the next like couple of days, but may take a few weeks.
sure.
We are
And the
AI is running too, and I think it's maybe only running on the main room. Um, I'm
and
not sure
for
if it runs on
summaries,
this room. Yeah, for summaries. So
right?
those might be available too. We haven't seen those in our other summits we've done.
And I copied down your email, Leanne, so I'll send you my info. And we're hoping, well, more than hoping, right around the middle of June, and we're hoping to have it done by June 12th, if not sooner. We're going to launch this Legacy of Launch website, and it'll talk about what I talked about today, everything that has happened and is happening, and then how people can get involved. And we're really looking for corporate sponsors. You know, Jared Isaacman was our first major sponsor for this campaign. And then we're going to the Blues and SpaceX's and the folks that are well-funded space companies and also are housed at the Cape. But then we also want to open it up to the public so people can get personally involved. And if somebody wants to give a dollar or 20, we're going to have a platform where they'll do that. And then each level will have different where you can get a patch or you can get more involved, and then be able to kind of follow the story. We'll have by the June 17th, we're going to have the Sands History Center back open to the public. And so that'll be a great facility that people can already come to. And then as we start to roll out those tours, we'll be able to talk with everybody who's involved and who signs up. We'll be able to find out about that. And to be able to come out and that's what we were talking with Kevin earlier, just all, so many of us have had a little bit of access, but to really be able to show that to people that have always been curious about what those old launch pads look like, or being able to even stand under Launch Complex 34 and how solemn that is, where the Apollo 1 tragedy happened. But then you look a little bit out to your left and you see just not too far away is exactly where SpaceX is going to be building those new Starship platforms. And
Hmm.
just so to be able to see the old and new all in one setting is it's really cool and inspiring.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
And Kevin, if you'd like to, if you have a PDF or a PowerPoint that you're open to sharing, you can upload that to Mark too, and
Oh,
he
great.
could share that out,
Yep. Yep.
as part of the
We
resources. Yeah.
what's really cool, part of that website, we filmed inside those old launch complexes just this past week, and we're putting together like a 3 or 4 minute video of that experience, and in hearing it from Ray Sands and from Bob Ward and a little bit from me, and it'll really I think it'll hopefully be really impactful, and people will start to learn about or see things that they have literally just never seen before, and how people can get involved and come out and be able to be a part of it.
Cool.
Cool. Is that oh, Leanne,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, just real quick.
Yeah, of course.
I invite anybody in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm with the Analemma Society, and we,
Mhm.
with the local park authority of the county, have a roll-top observatory. We have several telescopes, and we had a very vibrant public
Cool.
response. So any Friday night after this summer passes, you can come and look through our telescopes. We have invited speakers,
Nice.
and
And you're
that's
in the DC area?
yeah, it's
Sure.
the Turner Farm Park Observatory,
Nice.
sponsored by the county. And
A lot of
for the eclipse, we had about 3,000 people.
wow. That's
I'll
awesome.
send you the information on it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Um
I'm
we
going to
I
jump out to the main room and like
Yep.
make sure everything's going okay there.
Good seeing you, Ron.
Thanks so much. Great to see you.
Uh, I used to, a lot of years ago, Leon, I used to live in just outside of Arlington in Roslyn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So a
Yeah.
lot of,
Arlington has a good teaching planetarium for their
oh,
school
cool.
system
Yeah.
system.
Nice. Nice. Well,
Okay,
thanks
well,
for,
I look forward to hearing from
yeah,
you.
I'll send you my email, and yeah, look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jim.
Yeah. Good talking with you guys.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yep. Great. Good stuff.